Hi, it's me, Tony Harmer, aka the Design Ninja, here in the Work Smarter Not Harder dojo. Now, if you've ever tried to create anything other than a line with an arrowhead for callouts on an illustration or design project in Illustrator, you've probably found it involves a bunch of objects and outline paths that have to be redrawn for each and every instance. Well, I'm going to show you a technique that you can use that is flexible, it keeps everything together, and it doesn't take too long to set up. But before we get started, I'm just going to ask you a favor. If you're not already, then please do subscribe to the channel and hit the bell for notifications so you can see new content as it arrives from the dojo, and we've got lots to look forward to. Okay, great. Let's go ahead and then get started making cooler callouts in Illustrator.
We're going to use this illustration here and create some callouts to different parts of this creature. I've made them nice and bold so they're easy for you to see on a small device, but of course you can make them however you want, but they will be flexible. So let's go ahead and hide this layer and make a different layer active. And by the way, you should be able to do this in any version of Illustrator from about CS4 onwards with just a couple of small changes here and there. So I'm going to start this with some type. So I'm going to go ahead and create some type here, and I'll just use the word tail. I'm doing this in uppercase. Of course, as with everything else, you can make this work the way you want it to work, and left aligned. I think I'll just change this perhaps for something like New Site Grotesque Bold. There we go, perfect. And what I'm going to do here straight away is I'm going to remove the fill for these characters. Now, you may think that you don't need to do this, and possibly you don't, but it's good practice to do this because of the way that Illustrator creates text. It creates the characters separately to the type. So making sure that my fill is in front down here in the toolbox, I'm going to hit the slash key. That removes that fill, and then I'm going to add two new fills. So I'm going to hold down the command key or control on Windows and hit the slash key twice. That will create me my two new fills. And so the top one here, I'm going to fill that with white, and the bottom one I am going to fill with red, like so. Now, you won't see that just at the moment because it's exactly the same shape as the letters, but now with this highlighted, if I go to my effects, I can choose convert to shape. I'm going to choose rounded rectangle here, and then I'll leave the width as it is. I think that's fine. I'm going to change the height, just make that a little bit smaller, like so. And the corner radius, I think I'll make that maybe about 3 on the nail. There we go. And actually maybe make that height slightly bigger too. There we go. That's fine. And of course we can edit this at any point by going to the fill and clicking on rounded rectangle. Okay, great. Now we've got that. We're going to need the pointer. So I'm going to go for my polygon tool just here and draw a polygon. Now by default, I'll draw a hexagon, but if I use the down arrow on my keyboard 3 times, there you go, I can change that to a triangle. And I'm going to hold down Shift to draw this perfectly upright just for the moment. And then personal preference, just going to round off those corners a little bit there, like so. Okay, this one's going to point at the tail. So let's just put these two things in the locations that I'd like them to be. So I'll bring this around, actually make that just a bit smaller. That is super huge, just there. And then go ahead and point that at the tail. Let's zoom in so we can see both of those things on screen. And also, I don't need the appearance panel just now. I'm going to get my pen tool. Okay, and this time I'm actually going to use the real pen tool. People who watch this regularly will know I'm such a big fan of the curvature pen tool, but here I am going to use the pen tool. And making sure that I'm inside of this shape, I am going to click and drag outwards like so to just create control handles for the moment. I'll then come up to this region here, okay, and do exactly the same thing. Click and drag to the right to give myself some control handles. Now at the moment, this has a red fill and no stroke. So what I'm going to do is hold down the Shift key and tap X to swap those over. And then I'm going to hit the Escape key to stop me drawing with the pen tool and just dial up the weight of this stroke here. So I'm just scrolling over the stroke value here. I'm going to change this to about 42 points, I think is working well for me. Now I've done that, I'm going to hold down Shift and tap W to get myself the width tool. Then I'm going to come down to this end of the stroke and I'm going to just make this much, much smaller there, like so. I think that's just fine. I'll go to this end of the stroke and also just change that and then just change it back a little bit just to make sure there are width points on both ends of the stroke. Now that I've done that, and I'm just going to actually move that a little bit just to make sure it's right down on the end there. There we go. And now that I've done that, I'm going to save this as a profile. Now again, personal preference, I like to save the weight of the stroke approximately with that so I know where the starting point is for this stroke because they are width dependent. So I'll just go to the stroke panel. I could also do this here in the properties panel, but if I go to stroke just here, okay, and come down to the bottom, I can click on the save to disk icon there. So click on that and I'm going to call this callout and 42 PT, just there like so. That's the one for the width. You don't need to do that. You can name it whatever you want, but now I've got that saved as a profile and you'll see I've got a few in there as well for other different types. So that's great. I've got all of the components I now need here, okay, to make this. So what I can do is I can select all of those items there and then group them together. So Command G or Control G to do that because I want to keyline these things together. So to do that, I'm going to go to the Appearance panel and I'm going to add a new stroke to this group. Now you can click this icon down at the bottom left, or you can use the shortcut Option Command or Alt Control / to add a new stroke, like so. Now this is going to be drawn on top of all of the objects at the moment, so you can see it's drawing everything just there. But if I bring that down underneath the group's contents, it's drawn underneath. Now, whatever stroke weight you actually want, let's just say arbitrarily you want it to be a 6-point stroke, then you would dial in, okay, 12 points just here because you'll get 6 drawn either side. You'll notice that the option to align the stroke to the inside and the outside is unavailable here. There is a way you can do that, but that's for another movie. Now we can make adjustments as necessary. So I'm going to get the direct selection tool here and click on this first point. And I want to hold down Shift because I want the curve to start perpendicular to the shape just there and just bring that out so it bends slightly. And then we'll go ahead and add another one. So I'm going to grab this group and I'm going to Option drag or Alt drag a copy. And then I'm going to change the text content here. So I'm going to change this to wings. So if I get my type tool, I can double click here and type wings like so. Now I might also want that to be in a different direction. So let's go ahead and move that down to this point here. Okay. And for some reason that group has separated. I'm not quite sure what's gone on there, but anyway, I can fix it. If I just double click to go into isolation mode, I can then start to work with this. So I'm going to spin this point around just here, okay, and bring that in like so. And then I'm also going to rotate this arrowhead to the right place and bring that down to the wings. And then with my direct selection tool, I just tap A for that, I can grab hold of this end of the path and then just amend that as necessary. Now, it might be an idea if I was doing something from this side to actually change that type direction, so the paragraph alignment options, to align right, because that way, if I needed to type anything longer with one of these subsequently, if I just come out of isolation mode and show you, okay, I can then, so let me just say, for example here, I've gone into isolation mode. That's what happened last time as well, by the way. If I wanted to say like big elbow, I'm not worried about the upper and lower case. I'm just showing you the text is emanating from the right point. Okay, so there you go. That's how you can draw and outline something that has both fills and strokes in it to create your own super cool callouts for your illustrations and diagrams.
Now there you go, that wasn't too difficult at all, was it? Now, while I used a fairly cartoony example, so it was big and bold and easy to see on a small screen, you could of course make your callouts entirely your own. It's the technique that matters. So there you go, now you have another technique under your belt. I'll see you next time here in the dojo. See ya.